firm but with little give. Yep, these are medium rare.
What if somebody wants theirs well done?
We ask them politely yet firmly to leave.
This episode has colorful language, so parental discretion is advised. Moving forward, we're not going to swear in excess, but after the retail horror stories and I got feedback from that, seems like our general audience is okay with the occasional vulgarity. It won't be excessive. It's just going to help us from not censoring what we say. And I think help overall with the flow and the conversation of the show. So hopefully you're still there, you're still enthusiastic, and you still have faith in us to tell you, answer your questions and whatnot. All right. Enjoy the show.
Parental discretion is advised for the moment while I'm getting candid. Now understand it. Ain't you typical in any way, though the pro on the mic is the D.O. to the C. This is an intro.
Hi, it's Travis. It's just going to be me this week. I'm going to be reading some of the questions that listeners have submitted, so please sit back and enjoy.
Good cutting enhances the quality of good meat. In his way, the meat cutter is an artist. Poor cutting results in an inferior piece of meat, regardless of quality.
First things first, I need to do what I'm going to start calling corrective actions is when we make a correction here on the show. So this is that segment. Rising Spring Meats is writing to correct me on the price of the cash special. They say it's between $1,500 and $1,800, and you can get that online. I'm not going to say where. They don't pay me any money, but yeah. So my price that I gave was wrong, and yeah. So that's a pretty good deal. $1,500 to $1,800, a lot better than the $22 to $25 that I said last episode.
Remember, there are no dumb questions.
Yeah, right here.
In the back, yes. The retard with the dumb questions.
The Moonanite's bringing us in for a second time, if you're keeping track at home. Want to apologize for that hard R in that intro, but the early 2000s was a different time. People didn't know better. Anyway, let's get on with the show. Our first questions come from Ben Ayers from Instagram. Writes, "Hey guys, I have a question about pork. In my last two jobs, I would often cube pork butts for sausage. Often, maybe even half the time, the butts would not manage any shape. The muscles would just slide off each other. The intermuscular fat seemed to be super loose and sloppy, like a web. So when I was cubing the meat, I felt like I was trying to cut through a jellyfish. Even with a freshly sharpened knife, the cubing was just the pain. The butts we got were sold to us as Brookshire pork. Our supplier, however, often could never identify where the pigs came from. The meat quality was still decent, especially for sausage, but that fat, I could never figure it out. Later, when I would get pork middles from the same supplier, I got the same result about half the time. The seams were just super sloppy, and the loins would just sort of flop onto the cutting board, even when the bone was in. If I had any sway, I'd change suppliers, but my hands were tied. What would cause this? Were these previously frozen, poor feed, too young, or old? These chops were especially wimpy while sitting in the case. Any ideas what have caused this?" Well, thank you. Those were some great questions. You see this a lot on coal cows, on old beef that are just barely alive. You see them on beef that were only milk producers. But he's talking about pigs. So what could it be? I'll start off by ruling out it being frozen. A majority of pork in America is frozen at a certain temperature for a certain number of days to help fight trichinosis, which is also pretty much non-existent in Western world. We can also rule out the animal being too young. Most animals are taken to market around 14 months when they achieve a weight of just shy of 200 pounds. That is your typical market hog. So people don't genuinely want to take their animals before that because they lose money, or after that because their feed plateaus and then they'll lose money. So that's the sweet spot. Remember, farmers have margins too. Now, if the animals were denied access of water or didn't get enough water or feed when they were juveniles or growing up, then it could shock the kidneys, which would stunt the growth, which would cause some of the symptoms that you're seeing. But the likelihood of that happening to 50% is unrealistic. Poor animal welfare could also be contributed to this. If you were to take animals that were raised in a hot climate and the slaughterhouse is in a cold climate and they end up having to travel a couple days, it may shock the system to create these results. Or if the animal is riled up before it is slaughtered, it is going to cause graying of the meat, which is releasing of adrenaline, which is going to have an effect like this. And if that's the case, then it would be a problem with, that would be an issue for the slaughterman. And a solution at that point is to, contact the slaughterhouse or your provider and say, are these humanely handled and are they monitored by a third party that is not the slaughterhouse or the USDA, that a third company will come in to ensure that things are being done properly, and that would help benefit this. A lot of people realize or don't realize that humane handling isn't just to benefit animal welfare. It actually produces better quality meat and better yields. It doesn't make sense to abuse animals from an economic standpoint. Now, most likely, it's probably none of these things I just mentioned. What I think it most likely is if it's from a small farm, that they just have an inconsistency in product, which I see all the time working with small farms, is that they're trying new things or they got lucky once and something beyond their control, like environment, does something like this, that, half the pigs turn out a certain way. They don't have a big enough herd to pull out good ones versus shitty ones. And this is what you're left with. When I mean small farms, I mean farmers working with herds genuinely under 500 animals. I invite our listeners to also email us or hit us up on Instagram. Both those will be in the show notes, and I'll say them at the end. If you have a different opinion, I would love to hear it. I always want to just say, first and foremost, I'm working with my experience and could only work off of things that I have dealt with in realms of this. So I may be wrong. There may be something else. There could be many other things that it could possibly be. But with that kind of loose pork that's wilting, I'm sure there's a lot of moisture loss. I'm sure on your tray when you change your paper at the end of the day that there's a lot of purge on it. That's going to make great myosin, though. So you're going to end up getting good protein extraction besides the, I'm assuming, low fat content because the fat's all webby. So I would set aside your good fat from your good shoulders and then use this product for, I'd recommend emulsification products like hot dogs, bologna, and things of that nature, maybe mortadella. And then if you were to actually make like a coarse sausage, you're going to want to crust freeze it, because with that protein extraction, you're at risk of getting smeared, which is going to cause a grainier taste and going to make your sausage look like shit. So crust freeze your trim if you are using it for sausage to avoid that from happening. 27 degrees Fahrenheit would be good. And add fat, save your fat. Fat is gold. An ideal ratio is 70% lean to 30% fat. Polish Gun on Instagram, all the way from Belfast, Ireland. First question: how important do you feel social media is these days? That's a great question. In our industry, which is something that is an old industry, I believe social media is shedding light on it in many ways. I have actually gotten work because of social media. I view it as a resume that you could, or a jumping off point if someone were to see my page and they had an understanding of the industry, I would hope they would be able to look at it and be like, hey, that person knows their shit. And if I was running a small shop, I would use Instagram to promote specials, sales, sandwich of the day, what's fresh in the case, unique cuts, things like that. And I don't think it's a must for every business, but I only know of places because of Instagram. Essentially, that's how I connect with people. And I also feel that people want to belong to like a tribe. So if you see most of the people that butchers follow, it's other butchers. And I'm the same way, that I want to be like, hey, what's that guy doing? Or etc. Or, I'll be like, wow, I never thought of cutting that way. Because of social media, I'm able to see that. And I could pull on my followers or, to ask questions. And I like to view butchery as more like, with me on social media, that it's more open source. Like, I'm not going to give you a HACCP plan, but if you have like a question of how much salt to use, or what's the name of this cut, or how would you market this, and it's just a quick solution, I have no problem helping. And I want a lot of people to be that way. People covet this skill. And, like, I never want to be one of those people that look down because of somebody doesn't know something. That's a shitty way to live. And that's the downside of social media is, there's trolls out there, and, I'll read through the comments and I'll see some guy who's just starting out. And then there's some guy who's been in the industry maybe a few years longer, and they'll be like, oh, you need to go back to meat cutting school, or blah, 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 blah. And you know what? That ain't helping anybody. That's not making you look like a better cutter. That's making you look like a fucking dick. And I want to comment and, say like, look at my profile and judge me. And every once in a while, I want to say something and defend, and I will. But negativity doesn't wipe out negativity. At the end of the day, that person who makes that comment is still going to think that they're better than that. And yeah, I want this to be more of like a community and a tribe. And it just frustrates me when people think it's more excluded and like look down. If you really want to be bummed, watch a YouTube video of some guy trying something for the first time and just read the comments of people who are very good at that exact same task. I would rather get, the multiple dozens of death threats I get by vegans than deal with a holier than thou cutter. If you're always looking down, you'll never see what's in front of you and where you could go. And also, don't worry about other people's shit. Just do you. I know I went on a rant there for a little bit, but I do believe social media in this industry is important, and it does have its downside with the trolls. So if you're a small shop out there, go on social media. It's not going to hurt your business. Polish Gun also writes, would either of you work retail again? And on our last episode, Retail Horror Stories, I talked about how I left the retail industry, how I was pretty much in the middle of a conflict with one of the owners, and I put in my 2 weeks. I had another job lined up that I loved working at that shop. I loved working with the customers, as frustrating as some can be at times. I met my wife there. Because of working there, my life has changed for the better. As far as would I work retail again? Absolutely, if it was the right circumstances. I've always joked that when I retire, I would like to work in a grocery store just cutting box product a few days a week. But the truth is, my carpal tunnel and my arthritis aren't going to allow me to do that big push that I used to be able to do. That's why